Hello, everyone. We just tried to play a video. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, the audio was not able to come through. So we will fix. We will. It's all about continuous work on doing live streams. We're living in a pandemic, so. Hello, everyone. My name is Trisha Etchinger. I am an enrolled member of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. I also am the Director of Operations for Great Plains Action Society. And today we are addressing the MMIR crisis with an interview with Dr. Colette YellowRobe. And we are also doing a first 100 Days of Change campaign. And basically what we're doing is we're going through the Tribal Nation Plan that Biden and Harris have put together for their term in office, and we're basically just going to pick things from there that are very important. Not to say that all of them are very important, but things like MMIR, climate change, those are the things that we are going to address within the first 100 Days of Change, because I feel like those are definitely issues that need to be addressed. So today I'm very, very fortunate to introduce Alexandria Flanders, who has also worked with us on RNVP / Vote Mob, and she did wonderful. She is now a youth intern here with Great Plains Action Society. So I will add her to the live stream. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Yeah, so this is her first time doing an interview, so we're very excited. Like I said, we're still learning. Alex, if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then when you're comfortable, we'll bring Dr. YellowRobe onto the live stream.
All right. So my name is Alexandria Flanders. I am an enrolled citizen of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska, but I am also Oglala Lakota and Sac and Fox. I started working for Great Plains Action Society at the beginning of this year, and since then we've been working on a lot of things revolving Biden's 100 days, such as the issue we're talking about today, missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. I am also a student at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and I'm studying Native American Studies, Tribal Management and Emergency Services, as well as creative nonfiction in English. I'm ready to bring Dr. Colette YellowRobe on if everybody else is ready. Thank you, Dr. Colette YellowRobe, for being here and taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us for this special interview addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous relatives epidemic. For those viewers who are watching but not quite sure what MMIR is, could you please elaborate in your own words and what it stands for?
Of course, yes, absolutely. It's great to see you, Alex and Trish. I love seeing you both virtually. Hello, everyone who's joining us today. Thank you, and Aish, Pinigigi, where I grew up. So missing and murdered Indigenous relatives is what MMIR is, hashtag MMIR. And that's an extension of the foundational grassroots activism that our Northern relatives in Canada unfortunately had to start the activism due to the rates at which we are killed in terms of being Native women, children, girls. And it's expanded into the relatives. It's a more inclusive concept, and it's also trying to acknowledge we had complex systems of gender and sexuality, of course, and that's okay. So we're normalizing our traditions as well, and for the most part to advocate for our relatives that are being targeted and unfortunately murdered. I'm very assertive. I forgot to tell everyone that's sorry, but that's real. I really get down to it when we're talking about this issue. I'm very passionate. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're comfortable with sharing what happened in your personal life that made you want to be heavily involved with the MMIR and advocating for it, could you tell us about it?
So probably most recently, I was invited very kindly by a local society group here in Lincoln, well, the state really, in the Great Plains region, to speak at a rally about a month ago at the Capitol in order to advance the first 100 days and make sure Indigenous Native American voices are at the table in our new administration. And it dawned upon me both right up until the day I was meditating. I usually take some time to put thought in, meditate, pray in my beliefs to what I should be addressing. And I wait for that kind of the spirit, in my words, creator guide me. And I had struggled almost like a block, like a writer's block or a thought, feeling, heart block for a couple of weeks beforehand. And I started to think about hashtag MMIW, hashtag MMIWG, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And it dawned upon me what I had been going through as a family member and as a mother to my own sons. That really came crashing down hard upon me. So I actually talked about, for the first time, with my family's consent, of course, reaching out to them about my own nephew. His name was Chase YellowRobe. He was murdered quite viciously up in the Muddy District, up in the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in 1996, July of 1996. And we were just young at the time. I was still in college, early 20s, just not really understanding how this has been going on so pervasively, not just in terms of since 1492, but also even within my own family. It really crystallized and clicked for me. And watching my youngest son, who I've asked for consent in order to share some of these details with, enrolled member of my tribe, but also a multiracial young son, 12-year-old, and how he has recently developed elevated blood pressure from the stress, especially with the recent coup on the White House by the white supremacists that basically tried to invade the Hill, Capitol Hill, White House, whatnot. And watching him go through that was a very humbling moment of how I've walked very humbly, trying to advocate for us as women, yet I felt like I was completely harshly reminded by the creator that what about our male relatives, our two-spirit relatives, our trans, intersex relatives, and my own children for that matter? That's kind of a long-winded answer, Alex, but I appreciate you asking that, because this will now be the second time that I've acknowledged that. And I think that's very important. We have to start somewhere. And I'm certainly not the first one.
I'm all for the long-winded answers you give me. So I guess adding on to this, could you tell us who Tishia Big Black was and who she was to you?
Yes.
Or what she was personally like?
Yes, she was my niece. So this would have been one of my young relatives that was subject to violence in her relationship and mistreated oftentimes. And she was found unconscious and later passed away in Billings, Montana. And as a result, we've heard about coroner reports. This actually happened here in Nebraska with Zachary Bearhill, where it's the cause of death is due to some unrelated, which would not be able to be used in any prosecution of a perpetrator. It was chalked up to exposure or blunt force trauma to her head, and therefore the investigation ended, and her perpetrator has never been brought to justice, and maybe won't.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is. And again, thinking about Zachary Bearhill here in state of Nebraska, that was questionable too with the coroner's report.
What are some of the structural barriers that Native families face in the event that one of their relatives goes missing and or murdered? What does your family face in regards to MMIR, Tishia Big Bag?
Mm-hmm. I would say that the number one crime or cause, social justice issue at the time, it wouldn't be considered, that was quite a while ago, that's more of a nouveau term, would be stigmatization and stereotyping. It's racism. And first and foremost, considered disposable, Native women being considered disposable women, especially in urban centers, especially if they have not lived a life that is considered acceptable and whatever that means, and normalized in dominant society, power dynamics, and the fact that she also chose to use drugs and alcohol that further reinforce that stereotype against her.
In a February 2018 research policy update by the National Congress of American Indians, more than 4 out of 5 women have experienced violence in their lifetime. 1 out of every 2 Native women have already been subjected to sexual violence. Why do you think these rates are so high?
Because the laws are not being governed by anti-racist and this is very wishful thinking, because then I don't mean to be punny right now when I say this, but it's certainly not a decolonized legal system. So Native women are very much being subjected to erasure. And then when we do exert voice, that becomes a matter of our local police forces or where, depending on where they live, on or off tribal lands, are they even believing their testimony or their filing of a complaint? It's that basic of a flagrant silencing of voice and the just erasure of experience. It's not real. It's oftentimes turned around on us, especially when you think about younger relatives who are unfortunately being subjected to horrid and generational sexual assault, sexual abuse, and incest in their families. It becomes normalized in that sense.
What can be done?
Not normal, for the record.
You're fine. What can be done to help decrease these alarming rates?
Elect more Native women to local tribal councils, if you are a member of a tribe or a nation in our country, or for that matter, and let's elect more congresswomen like we already have. I'm so ecstatic about, of course, soon to be Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, and of course Sharice Davids close to me in Kansas. I'm very, very happy and proud that they were elected, but remember, that was only 2 years ago. We have to get more Native women at these tables, and then also support our grassroots activism, much like what you do, or Trish, or everyone else. This is not about competition. This is all hands on deck right now. Holding my institutions accountable. Education has to be held accountable. My dream is we will introduce MMIR inspired curriculum to start changing the education system, so we're not erasing and normalizing this kind of egregious behavior.
Speaking of that, have you seen anything done by major corporations like that to promote awareness of these situations?
Corporations like whom? I go to business when you say that, the business sector?
I'm talking mainstream media, more of bring awareness to these things.
This would be problematic too. So I totally accept all the criticisms that will come after I say this, but I would say Hollywood is starting to capitalize on that in many ways. They have introduced it into some television shows. I've seen footage, with some of our actors, which I'm sure is a lonely road as well. In Hollywood, they are starting to spread awareness. Yeah, I've seen that kind of a mainstream start to introduce it. I would certainly question motives there, and this isn't an attack about our peoples who are working in that industry, but I would say it's not reached the high levels it needs to reach yet, is what I'm saying.
I want to follow up on that and ask if there's any grassroots organizations, any people that are actually on the ground, doing this work. Have you seen anything like that? And more or less, what are the proactive solutions that Natives are doing for themselves? Because we see this repeated, we're being ignored blatantly by this system that was never even meant for us to survive in the first place. So have you seen any proactive solutions from Natives for Natives, basically?
Yes, I have. That's probably most of the places I've seen it, almost exclusively seen it. And I even mean actually Native-led nonprofits as well, not just sort of, they call it virtue signaling, where it's sort of I sound critical here, but you're kind of perpetuating an image as opposed to who's actually funding it. And quite frankly, Trish, it's been underfunded grassroots activism. that's who's led the charge, especially in my state, in Nebraska. That is absolutely, and where my tribe is, Montana, all grassroots. Everything that's been transformed has started with the people. And to some degree, which gives me hope, the tribe's unifying too. That's a really remarkable thing to watch. And that's what, I guess, where I try to promote the MMIR. Actually, Trish is making me end Alex's question. I have to go back and have to be honest. I was where I am today, Alex and Trish, was not where I was 3 or 4 years ago. I remember taking a whole year to meditate to get into this because of what I've gone through as I'm a sexual assault and abuse survivor myself. And also realizing it's evil. It's an evil empire, so to speak. And when I first started grassroots activism efforts, I got called out on that by some of our male relatives, trans and two-spirit relatives, and quite fairly. And I could not produce an answer. So I always want to thank them. I have some names that come to mind back then. I always want to thank them. Then I started remembering my own relatives, who would have been subject to brutal misconduct just for being trans or two-spirit.
Yes, yep. I feel like most, in this time and age, I feel that we are beginning to have these uncomfortable conversations, but they're long overdue, and we need to have those conversations. I think tiptoeing around, I think in this time and age, as uncomfortable as it is, ask questions. Ask, is this okay? Like, is this not okay? Especially when it comes to the LGBTQIA2S plus community. I still too am learning. Just thank you so much for touching on that point. Alex, if you would like to ask the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2013, President Barack Obama reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA. Safeguards were put into place specifically for Native American women and members of the LGBTQ plus community. In 2019, VAWA expired and has not been reauthorized by former President Trump and Senate Republicans. It still sits currently waiting to be approved. What do you feel needs to happen in order for VAWA to get reauthorized? And do you feel that it would offer protection and prevention?
Well, let's go with the first question, the first one thing at a time. So this will be where we have to essentially, from the grassroots, the people, the public level, and those who want to trying to walk in allyship with us, this has to become brought back to the forefront, especially in light of when probably Deb Haaland becomes our new Secretary of Interior, which is great. However, that's kind of the problem in the system when you only have 1 or 2 representatives for representing sovereign nations. That's going to become problematic because her time will be devoted elsewhere, which is totally fine. So we have to make sure that we're keeping a watchful eye, vigilant eye, in terms of being the public and dual citizens, of course. And then secondly, I would also encourage our next level in government, encourage our tribes to send correspondence as well. And more recently, NCAI has stepped into the MMIW, MMIWG, MMIR. So, that's an option as well. What I'm trying to say by just making a couple of points is we can't take any options off the table right now, as long as they're not being, capitalizing on us. That would be my one caveat, because we're very vulnerable in that sense. And then in terms of will it protect us, it's a start. I don't think there's any magical thing right now. It's a start, and it's a righteous start. And I think it's quite egregious how it was stalled out with Representative Deb Haaland. But it was.
Many, if not all, families are left without long-term protection and resources. Do you know of any grassroots efforts in coming up with proactive solutions to this ongoing problem?
In different regions, yes. We have a couple of national, well, I would say global. There's a couple of global agencies that come to, or efforts, I would say, that come to mind. The most effective I've seen is, again, the grassroots regional efforts. It's like a network of sorts. I wouldn't even really label it. It's a very fluid, culturally responsive effort being made that can actually span several states. And social media has been an effective method of either fundraising for people or also like spreading the word out. It's much quicker. Like it's easier for us to forward on missing things. And then I'm going to be controversial, but I still say some of the, what I would call grassroots kind of warrior societies have been really effective. I would say we're not fully protected yet legally and interstate like we should be, especially when you bring up other issues, which can be an unfortunate preface to murdered, is trafficking or smuggling of humans. That's still a big area where we don't have the policy protections.
Joe Biden introduced VAWA in 1990 when he served as the chair of the U.S. Judiciary Committee. As a newly elected president, Biden has promised through his Tribal Nation Plan to tackle the crisis of violence against Native women, children, and elderly by reauthorizing VAWA. Providing the support for tribal justice systems, increasing data and transparency, and other solutions that secure funding for prevention and survivor support. Do you feel that President Biden will follow through on these promises?
I most certainly hope so. And again, I call back to, we have to keep reminding him as such. I did see that. I was pleased about that. It's one of those, let me go back to something I was saying earlier. I think this is a great point to make right now. The ethics of what's going on right now they're not keeping up with the current issues going on. So the ethics of the law are still operating under older systems of oppression. And so I would hope so that he will. Yes. However, I'm concerned that it could get lost in the shuffle just because there is so much going on. And I don't want it to become a matter of who has the loudest voice, which can dominate our political system at times. Quite frankly, lobbyists, for example, I don't want things like that to get lost. I'm going to go back to when I remember being asked this question before we ratified LB 154 in the state of Nebraska. This is where I am still very naively hopeful in people and humanity, Alex. I still believe in us as people. And I mean all of us in the United States and then North America, Turtle Island for that matter. I still believe in us. I believe we can get it done. I really do. I believe in the people. And strategy-wise, I think he's doing an effective job by nominating Deb Haaland, of course, and then all the other amazing representation we're getting in the system. But what I found very, very key to his first 100 days plan was tribal consultation, because that is not done equally or equitably across the states. And what they consider tribal consultation is maybe sometimes not real, true tribal consultation, because I still want to honor the sovereignty of our tribes. And then eventually, because I believe there are some issues going on some of our tribal lands, then we can empower the women locally, women and children, or the future leaders, to actually make effective changes that are not under an old oppressive and imposed system, like we often found when they put us under that governmental system.
How can we make sure that we're able to hold Biden accountable in these situations?
You know me, go to your elected officials. That is their, regardless of partisan, that is part of that. We are their constituents. We have to honor are being, and like I've had to tell even my own children, ironically, and I think I got told when I was younger, this is not about being entitled or being whatever. This is our right. This is our right. This is our land. This is the least they can do. That's the very bare minimum of what they can do, holding them accountable to our distinct legal, political status in this country. We have a very special and unique and powerful status. So I guess my first wish, my first hope is we are going to assert voice. And then secondly, we're going to hold those who are elected accountable. That is what they're going to do. And then finally, I would also encourage people who don't even maybe, because I think we kind of buy into this hierarchy of leadership, which I don't believe in. Leaders are not born. I don't do that myth of mentality or whatever. This is engaging all levels of our society, all levels. Younger, wherever they are, working class, I don't care. Definitely got to hold academics accountable. All levels are engaged in terms of asserting voice.
As the number of deaths from the COVID-19 pandemic climbed, so did the rates of the domestic violence and child abuse.
Yes.
When we put the pandemic on top of the ongoing epidemic, there are many layers. Would you be able to identify layers in regards to how COVID-19 has perpetuated violence against our relatives?
Okay, so going back to last year, it's almost a year ago when when unfortunately we started in the global crises, and then obviously the two others that we're now in, we're in 3 global crises right now. According to my network, my friends, colleagues, I would consider them trusted sources. When it came to trafficking, the abuse, or obviously the flagrant killing, we saw at best a 2-week decline once COVID started. 2 weeks. That was it. So that system in itself, Alex, has never stopped. There was maybe a 2-week delay, but it's been ongoing. It has not changed. So the same factors that were present before, in terms of poverty, predatory behavior going on with, you got to think about places where there's industry or land. Resources and land are inextricably tied to the amount of women, Native women and children being harmed or killed or abused. It's almost a direct correlation. It is so disturbing. So that being said, all of those same factors or remote lack of police enforcement, laws just barely being put into place. I'm thinking of Nebraska. It was a fresh law and implementation of such. All of those factors were still in play. And the only thing that caused the delay was just the adjusting to a pandemic. I'm trying to tell you a portrait about how insidious and how across this issue goes in terms of all systems. All systems have become complicit in this one egregious crisis that we're in as Native Americans in this country and across the borders as well. I just want to be mindful. That's another topic for another day, but that's where it really starts to become depressing, is when you see the parallels in the globe. That was a very humbling moment for me when I could read probably parallel stories in Australia, for example. It was so humbling. Do you want me to list some more risk factors there? The reason I'm cautious about too many risk factors is this. I'm going to put this preface out, is we're always blamed as Native women. It somehow becomes our fault. And I'm very against victim blaming. So again, we have to think about the systems have not caught up with anti-racism strategies, and then that patriarchal nonsense that pervades our systems, tribal, local, state, and federal. So those would be the main conflicting variables. And then it also becomes a culture of silence problem, which I'm not trying to blame anyone. I've been there. I understand that. And also breaking the silence is where I usually probably try to go first. Have we, in terms of families, tribes, schools, neighborhoods, communities, wherever we're living, maybe you do the suburbs, you know, good for you. I'm happy for everyone. Have we made it to where our children feel as though they can tell us and we believe them? Ask yourself that question. Look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself if someone told you, you would believe them.
Thank you so much. I want to show a comment here. So Mona says, man camps, right? So we've had the death of the KXL. The cancellation was signed in the first week of Biden's day into office, which is great. However, could you kind of expand how MMIR, sex trafficking, and fossil fuel extractions, it doesn't even have to be fossil fuel, it could be just big corporate projects. How does that all correlate with each other? What do we see from that? And yeah, just maybe expand a little bit on that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And thank you, Mona, for that excellent point, because absolutely, that's what I was alluding to with Alex, that to make it more concrete, we have seen that with fracking, where they're doing the natural gas, not just in the Northern Plains, but, you know, it's been going out in the New England area for quite a while. And then we also have to remember that there are certain areas like the Great Lakes where there's an absolute system of freighting women, Native women, across the Great Lakes. So that involves even the ships, if that makes sense. The freighters that are carrying, you know, cargo, which includes us as Native and First Nations, of course, depending. Well, it could be really anyone in terms of Indigenous. And then also, this is a absolute concrete fact, but Native American women and African American boys, we are absolutely inextricably tied to violence when it comes to land and resource. So African American boys and girls are trans, you know, two-spirit, and then Native American girls, boys, trans, we are just automatically tied to that when there becomes a mining of land. And in the urban centers, you will see that as we are gentrifying, a lot of us either live in cities or we grew up next to cities where you will see this. They are starting to extract humans from the, you know, the areas that they actually funneled us into and segregated us into, and now they are taking back over. And you will see murder rates, mysterious murder rates going on.
Yep. That brings me to my next question too. Could you expand a little bit about what happened to Savannah LaFontaine Graywind, and then with the law that came from that? Would you be able to? Okay.
So Savannah, hold on a second. I wanted to look that up because I always go to okay, so if I remember correctly, that would be our dear friend Ruth Buffalo up in the Northern Plains. They advanced a law to protect, just a minute, I want to make sure that I'm giving her the credit that she's due.
From what I understand, Savannah was living in an urban setting. Is that correct? Like in the city, and then we had non-native perpetrators. Yes. Basically, she was with child and she was murdered, and they took her child, and then it wasn't discovered until I'm not sure, probably days later when we noticed that she was missing. And so I think from the law that it was more or less focused on bringing justice to non-native perpetrators that do bring harm to the tribal members, and things like that.
Yes. And I wanted to double check North Dakota. I was trying to make sure I wasn't conflating facts right there, which would be egregious. Sure. But yes. So so this case was a case of, yes, a young Native girl pregnant. And from what I understood, they actually harvested from her. I mean, is how I would put it. Again, trigger warnings to people. I apologize for my directness. However, we have to start putting verbal words to the actual grisly and barbaric treatment that we're going through. And those were non-native perpetrators. And what that helped revolutionize with our policymakers or our leading activists like that, Sarah Deer comes to mind. She's spoken about that quite a bit too. Is it actually turned the attention to how our laws for decades, because that's who set up the system, was to privilege non-native males and protect them from prosecution, even in terms of just domestic violence, let alone murder. So the state or that county element would come into play. Growing up where I did, I remember conversations about this, people who were assaulted, sometimes even by law enforcement officers in different towns, Native women, and there was never a way to get justice, because if it was not on the reservation, that perpetrator would be taken off. So yes, Savannah's was actually a very grisly situation.
I just want to throw up that Michelle Lemire says it was Indigenous relatives that were searching and found her remains. So that is, I think, one of the things that have came from, just trying to navigate through this whole epidemic is that we find, Indigenous relatives that get frustrated with the system and they go on their own and they do it themselves. And that's what we're finding now, is that we just have to do it ourselves. So I just, I wanted to kind of tie this all into the area of Iowa and Nebraska. I know Omaha, Nebraska is very diverse. There's a lot of, a mixture of people that are there. Do you know anything about, as far as like sex trafficking that happens in Omaha, Nebraska? Is it a highly trafficked area? And then I guess, I wanted to touch a little bit lightly on the Justice for Zachary Bearhill's, just what happened with Zachary, because that does too tie into mental health too as well. I don't want to dismiss, because like our men and our children are sacred too, and we have to address those as far as, the systematic errors that happened. Zachary was just not wandering, he was lost. They dropped him off in a city that is not considered to be his home. And he was going through an episode and, he was murdered because of that. So my first question then would be, do you know anything as far as sex trafficking that happens in Omaha, Nebraska?
Yes. It is present in Omaha and it is present throughout the state of Nebraska. My colleagues that I work with, yes, there is evidence of that. There is evidence along I-80. So we're seeing that in the towns along the way. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go in. It's a good thing I'm on lunch break right now, but even when we had football, there were reports going on with football games. It draws in. And then Omaha with the former World Series, of course, this has changed with COVID still. However, it's by Interstate I-80 and then Interstate 29. So it's almost a conduit for this sort of behavior. And my colleagues with trafficking, this is more on the global level too, of human trafficking awareness and fighting against it, just held actually a conference right before COVID actually started. So be a year ago now in the fall. And they found that there was still a lot of evidence going on. Again, that comes in with the interstate laws, meaning intrastate transport and commerce. There are bills being introduced again for that. And if those of you who are tuned in, or Trish or Alex, did Alex leave, by the way?
No, she's still here. I can add her on.
I see how it is. Okay, leaving me. All right. But I don't know if you noticed, they're trying PSAs now. So now there's, again, grassroots level education campaigns to actually teach people how to spot it, how to spot what it looks like. One more point on that, Trish. I also have to acknowledge, this is probably, we've seen this with other areas. I've actually experienced this in my life in a former relationship. Another phenomenon, if you want to call it that and being pleasant today, is the bystander effect now. That's one of the biggest issues with trafficking. And I'm sorry, no offense to my psychologist friends, I love you dearly, but I've experienced that when I was being brutally assaulted outside and nobody called the cops. They watched it like it was a movie, but no one helped me.
Yes.
And so now we are seeing this play out again with trafficking. So they may be able to identify, big trucks. You've driven by them on the interstate, sort of nameless manufacturing things. No one's calling in the cops, especially in the suburban areas. That's what we've seen. Or Walmart. This has happened in Lincoln. Attempted abductions to traffic and coercion.
Can you maybe expand a little bit what sex trafficking, like what signs are that people are aware of that? Some people may not just totally be unaware of it until they actually notice what to look for.
Okay, so it is linked, yes, MMIWG and MMIR, it is linked to it. And signs that they're looking for, these are advanced systems. They're very complex systems of people who are going to target victims or likely candidates in order to recruit them into usually it's a abusive sexual industry that they're trying to coerce them into, generally speaking. And also it could be, it kind of depends. Let me run two scenarios for you here. They can target people who are vulnerable. Maybe they're runaways. Maybe they have not been accepted for who they are at home. It could be some, recreational drug and alcohol use. I'm not saying, good or bad on that, but just things they target, vulnerable situations. Poverty, homeless or unsheltered, I like to say, and then younger, because it's a complex manipulation game. And we're talking about people who can really get your trust, like you really believe them, for example. And then secondly, we're also seeing this with our male relatives. That's why I like to always tie in they are also I actually know who we got back, fortunately. And it was their family who found him and then engaged other networks where he was to get him back home. It was never the law enforcement, unfortunately.
Yes. Going into that, could you talk a little about the story of, I don't want to say the story, but what happened with Zachary Bearhill and what can we learn from that?
Okay, so I have worked with and supported his family, of course. We honored them this last year, and my dear colleague and friend, Kevin. And before that, Dr. Frank Lemire, I know that's your relative, our awesome, amazing man. He was always at the courthouse. I remember that. And Kevin covered it quite well. So you can find those records online, and I encourage you to find those. So from my words, this is what I understood. He was let off the bus in Greyhound downtown Omaha. The bus station's downtown. It's been there forever, since I've always known. And then considered unruly apparently right away, and then he started walking. He did have a mental health disorder, diagnosed mental health disorder, and he made it as far as Midtown. That's like 60th, and I'm trying to think of those other. My son was there.
Yeah, I think it's Center and 60th. Yep.
He made it that far to a gas station, like a Quick and Go or whatever that is. And the police were called again, but by then he was thirsty. This is the summer. This is June.
Oh, it's hot.
And Nebraska's hot. And he was probably somewhat, out of sorts because he didn't have medication and he didn't know where he was. So just that disorientation alone. His mother had actually tried to find him. She was alerted to him being just, kind of cast off in Omaha, and no one responded. It did not reach the foot officers on the scene, which was a total of 4, by the way. And they tased him several times. I don't want to exaggerate, but I think it was 30 sometimes. It was an enormous amount of times here. That's a great question. I'm going to fail that quiz on the details, Trisha, because that's just so.
Oh no,
details, but it was quite a few, right? Oh, I'm being facetious on that. And anyway, they kept tasing him to basically control him, like he was not human. That's the best way I can describe the scenario. And as a result, lost consciousness. And as I was saying earlier, so we lost him. He's one of our murdered relatives right here in Omaha. The coroner, his official death ruling on it was excited delirium. I'll never forget that.
Yes.
That's the classic. It's your fault for everything. And police were not held accountable and were acquitted, actually, eventually.
So there's so this brings me to this
and I feel as though I can say this for the family. I think their settlement was $50,000 to $60,000. That's what they were offered.
Yes, and that's just something. I was there for the hearing, and it just made me so mad, because is that how much my life is worth? Is that how much Alex's life is worth? Is that how much your life is worth? Because I don't think so. You don't get to bring your relative back. There's no amount of money for that. Second, you're playing off of the Native American communities, because we are at a higher risk for, depression, for, mental health. And that's, it just really makes me upset with this system, because especially with Omaha, Mayor Jean Stoddard, I think is her last name, but Mayor Jean, they call her Mean Jean, had the chance and the opportunity to address this and make it right by taking away the rights of those police officers, their livelihood, their pay, everything. She had the opportunity and she didn't. In fact, she hired back, I think Ryan McClarity was the only one that was allowed to not come back. But she brought back two of the other ones full pay. I think the other one had some kind of, special condition as to what his pay was going to be. So now they're on the police force currently. And then third of all, it goes to show, if this is going to happen right here in Omaha, Nebraska. I even remember the passing of George Floyd. That excited delirium was also going to be a ruling in his.
And Michael Brown and Ferguson.
Exactly. So what are we doing? And that's not even addressing the taser issue. We still have to talk about that too. Can you use a taser? What is considered unnecessary force? Right now, the Omaha Police Department can use their taser at any point in time without having to answer to anybody. And it's just, you're using mental health. And not only that, we're putting layers on top of it now. Now we're saying, oh, George Floyd was under fentanyl and he was, doing this and that. Or, with our Native relatives, oh, well, she was an alcoholic. She deserved it. She, no, it's not how this goes. And, I just wanted to expand a little bit on that. Yes. So we are coming up on our time. Dr. Collette, I just wanted to, I know we didn't have the opportunity to introduce you at the beginning, but can you please tell us a little bit more of what you do and just anything that you want to share about yourself and anything about MMIR?
Okay, yes, of course, absolutely. Well, I wanted to clarify a few things because I'm a teacher, so I have details, So, excuse me, it's $500,000, but still that is not enough to Zachary's family. That's just egregious to think about putting even a number on that. And I remember last summer the emotionally crushing words they were sharing that put it in perspective of how we are ridiculed. We're considered whatever. And you were absolutely correct, Trish. Mayor Stothert, there were 0 convictions, and 3 of the 4 did get employment back. And the reason for that, to expand upon it, was again the law. The statute in Nebraska affords that, gives a lot of power to the unions in that sense, to the police unions, a lot of power. And there are states like Washington who have actually moved to true community policing, including statute changes. That would be another strategy. And I brought up Dr. Frank on purpose, Frank Lemire, in regards to Zachary Hills, but I wanted to make sure that we remember he actually had lost a sister in Omaha. And when I talked, I got permission from his family to talk about her last fall. Her name was Mickey or Michelle, and she was found in North Omaha. And I just wanted to, in the 80s, I can't remember the date top of my head. But I think we should remember that this has been ongoing in Omaha, right down the road from me, south of where, well, Alex goes to school there, We have to keep remembering that this is not off in some island somewhere in Pluto. This is right here, right now. I think there's a tendency to ignore when we bring up patterns in history of cases.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure, because this isn't just about me or my family, but thank you, Alex, for letting me speak about my family. But it's so much bigger than even our own families, which is a huge red alert for all of us. To your question, Trish, what do? I do what it takes. I'm a do what it takes person. That's my brand of education and activism. In order to affect the change, this must move beyond rhetoric. So now it's about action. How are we going to continue to employ action and hold things accountable? What I do for a living is teach. I work at the university, and then I am involved in several community things. I think when I grew up in Winnebago. I was fortunate enough to grow up among Winnebagos and Omahas, which I love. Santee enrolled Northern Cheyenne. So, it was a very wonderful experience. Learned to be very diplomatic, very diplomatic. But when I left the res, to go to college, my cocoon got really kind of stripped off me, which is cool, but I noticed how Natives, we were not represented anywhere, just basic things. And I got very indignant about it. And fortunately, my parents taught me to work hard, probably too hard sometimes. So I just started getting involved. I think I joined my first nonprofit board at 21. New mother. I just did it. I just stepped into it. Much like us first gen students too. We just kind of do it.
Yes.
I like to tell people, for all of us on this call, because I love both of you, and then I'm just a kid from the res who went for it. That's probably the best thing I hear with our friends and colleagues across Turtle Island, is we're just kids who went for it from the res.
Yes. Yep. Awesome. Is there anything else? Can people follow you on social media, or I don't know,
yeah.
There's a link, or
One thing I want to announce, if that's okay, we're actually going to write for a trafficking grant. We're going to do that. It's going to be Indigenous led. And so Alex and Trish, you were next on my email list to invite to a meeting. And then we actually have South Dakota partners too as well, tribal partners. So this will be the first for the region. And don't mean to throw shade. I'm actually a very direct person, but this will be the first research for MMIW, MMIWR, and trafficking led by Indigenous people. So I firmly believe in it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We'll definitely, yes, we would love to partner with you with that. And yeah, I think many great things can come from that. I think it's time to come up with the proactive solution. So, in the bustle.
And yep. I will just email that to you and Alex I meant to do that anyway, but I had to go get lunch for my little one. He expects me to feed him, that's just kind of how that goes as a mother.
Right, for sure.
And then I have a question back to both of you, because I think this is about co-constructing and not doing that, whatever. And I would say whatever you need to let me know as well. This is the time to advance things.
Yes, definitely. The line of communication is always open, like I said before. These are times where we're going to have to start having the uncomfortable conversations. We're going to have to kind of get through our differences, wherever it may be on Turtle Island. When it comes to things such as racism or lateral oppression, we have to address it, and we just have to keep pulling forward, because if we don't, the system is going to swallow us whole. And if we can't come together now, then, what's the point, So yeah, definitely, I'm on board for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with that. I know I have a snarky sense of humor sometimes, and some of that res way, how we do.
Yeah.
But with MMIR work, it was humbling when I realized I've been so devoted to Native women's empowerment or girls or Two-Spirit, but it really hit me that our own men or brothers, sons, kids, nephews, whatever. This is actually time to let them know that I walk with them. I will back them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to start ironing out how patriarchy has really eroded our psyches and our egos. It's been totally damaging.
Yes.
And they don't believe me yet, but we'll get there. Girls, we'll get there.
Yes,
we're working on it.
We'll definitely get there. Alex, is there anything else that you would like to add to the conversation?
I don't have anything, but I'd like to say thank you for coming today. It was very informational. I learned a lot of things as well.
So, if there's do you have anything else, Dr. Collette?
No, I just think Alex and Trish are two of the most phenomenal young Native women I know. So always want to honor them.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for having the time to come on to here to talk about MMIR. If you would like to know a little bit more, you can visit our website at greatplainsaction.org. You can like us on Facebook, IG. I think we have a Snapchat. We're trying to do TikTok. We're still working that out.
Clubhouse.
Yeah, right. MySpace too. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much. Please practice self-care. Talk about these things. I know this was a heavy subject. We do have another live stream. We're going to talk with families from Cozy Decorah, Lenny's Blackbird. Our family too as well has been affected as well. So we're going to definitely talk about those things. Sunrose Iron Shell has a poem that she's going to share with us. There's just a lot of things that will happen on the Sunday live stream. Dr. Collette YellowRobe, thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and we will definitely keep having these discussions in the future and building towards that. So, everyone, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.